You're watching Fox 4 News at 9 a.m.
From ribs to burnt ends to pulled pork, Kansas City has it all, right? We're going to get into the history of Kansas City's barbecue scene right after the break.
That looks good.
You know, Kansas City, of course, is known for a lot of things, the Chiefs, the fountains, and all that jazz. But, of course, the barbecue is a big one. So we are celebrating National Barbecue Month by teaching us about, Raffi here is going to teach us about the history of barbecue, this famous food. So he is a celebrity historian. It's Raffi Andonian.
Yeah.
Andonian. What's your experience with Kansas City barbecue, Raffi?
Well, Kansas City, of course, is where it's known as the Constantinople of barbecue. So my experience is because I like to see
Never heard that.
places.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's an author that came up with that. Dottie Griffith is the name, because Constantinople was known for bringing together East and West, different cultures. And I like to enjoy different cultures, lived in the South and the Midwest. And here you see the different cultures of barbecue come together in Kansas City.
That is, you're from the Northeast, it sounds like. Where are you from?
I lived in the Northeast for a while. I'm originally from California, and I moved to the Northeast and then Southeast, and then now in Missouri.
All right, so what should every Kansas Cityan know about the story of Kansas City barbecue?
Well, what's fascinating about Kansas City, as I mentioned, it brings the cultures together. So let's take a quick tour around the country to see.
Alrighty.
When Christopher Columbus came to the Western Hemisphere,
We're going that far back.
In the Caribbean, he noticed that there were indigenous people using green wood. That's the wood that still has moisture in it, and that wood was giving indirect heat for that slow-cooked meat feel that we kind of recognize as barbecue. Moves up to the mainland from there in the Carolinas. And that's where you get Western European influence. You know, in Western Europe, you go to England, France, Germany, you get a lot of basted meats.
Yeah.
That basting is where you get the sauce. Now, of course, there's a couple different kinds of sauce in the Carolinas, both vinegar-based and mustard-based.
Yeah.
But from there, as it moved west, what happens is in the Southeast, it's pork-based. Pork is the main meat. But in Texas, they have more room to graze cattle because pork is cheaper and takes up a lot less space. But when they go to Texas, beef is available. So now you get the beef cattle, the beef brisket of Texas. Wow. Then you get to Memphis, which is a port city. The port city includes sugar. Memphis is a Delta region, heavy sugar economy. Molasses, that sweet barbecue sausage.
Sure.
So how does all that fit into the Constantinople of barbecue right here in Kansas City? When you get to Kansas City, it's a guy from Memphis more than 100 years ago. His name is Henry Perry. He moves to Memphis. He moves here to Kansas City, opens up a barbecue joint, and he uses that Memphis sauce, but he doesn't care if it's strictly pork. He mixes the beef and pork. And that's why here you have the mixing, crossroads of the East and West, here in Missouri, of beef and that Southern tradition. Think about it. You have, for example, the burnt ends, which come from beef. You would not find that in the Carolinas. That's the Texas influence. But we're using a more Memphis-style sauce, tomato-based, sweet and spicy. So that merging is how you see Kansas City come together. That's why you find both beef and pork here, unlike the other places. And that sauce reflects that as well.
That is, oh my word, Raffi, you're quite good at this.
A lot of history behind the barbecue.
Yeah, because I will confess, I used to live in St. Louis and other parts of the country, and when I moved to Kansas City 6 years ago, burn ends were everything. Everybody burn ends on pizza and omelets.
That's very special to hear.
What's a burn? I mean, I know now, but that's unique, more or less, to Kansas City. It
is because of that merging we're talking about of East and West, and you know, Missouri, as you know, for many things, is where East and West come together, and the food history, if you will, food reflects culture. So it's naturally the culture is going to reflect the history of the different influences that we have here.
That's so. Like, what are some other examples here that are signature Kansas City things that sort of tell the story of Kansas City?
From different local barbecue joints, right? So you got the burnt ends, you got the ribs here, you have a variety here with the brisket there. There's a Texas influence, right? You have the beef ribs, you have ham here, which is more of the Southeast influence. You find that more in Virginia. So you have these different styles of meats that come together. You have a wider variety of meats here in Kansas City as a result of those influences than you would have elsewhere. If you go in the Southeast, for example, it's going to be very heavy pork. I'll give you a quick example. Yeah. Prior to the Civil War in the Southeast, Southerners were eating pork 5-to-1 compared to beef. 5-to-1 pork over beef. It's because pork is cheaper, takes up less space. There's less space in the East Coast. And remember, when pork runs wild, because it doesn't have to be contained in pastures the same way that beef does, it's going to get tougher meat. Right. So that's why the slow cooking tenderizes it. So it was really convenient for that area until we move out west, as I mentioned earlier, and you start to have the beef introduction in Texas. But that's why pork is such a big deal in the Southeast. It has those roots because it's cheaper and easier to raise pork, and because of the fact that it gets tougher meat when it's going in the wild, it's going to have more muscles. And that slow cooking, introduced by the indigenous people of the Caribbean, that makes its way up through with the Spanish, known as barbacoa in Spanish, is how you get the influence. It's like all the world in one. Hence, again, the Constantinople term. And In the end, I think that mishmash makes barbecue as American as apple pie.
Man, Raffi, I wish we had more time. You are a very impressive dude. Where can people find you if they want to?
On me, it's celebrityhistorian.com is where you go to find all my history material.
This was very impressive, dude. Thanks so much for coming in, Raffi.
Thank you.
Wow.